I've been thinking about doing this video for over a year, maybe more, but every time I get close to getting sort of done with it, there's new points that come out and I have to scrap everything. But since now we are not gonna get any more points, at least not from AMG, might as well sit down and actually finish it. So for the sake of record, these points are what AMG left us with at the end of 2.5. I'm not sure who this video might be even for. Initially, this was meant to be as like an introduction to the Separatists for people who were trying to get into the faction in 2.5. But now it might be just as a reference for anyone playing around with 2.5 points to see where they can improve things. And people in the comments can complain about something or mention how I forgot this really obvious thing or whatever. So, 2-pointers. 2-pointers in 2.5 have two functions. One is to get a bunch of ships as cheaply as possible, to build up a swarm really quickly and cheaply. And the other function is as filler ships, where you just need a little bit more points in your squad value to get up to 20. One ship to just sit back, hang out, collect an objective, maybe do some damage, maybe survive. And if it doesn't survive, then oh well, so it's just 2 points anyway, so who cares? The only ship that the Separatists have available for 2 points is the vulture droid. Vulture droid is not good in of itself. You can kind of imagine this as a TIE fighter, but much worse. Imagine a TIE fighter, but instead of 3 agility, you got 2. It's the same hull, same damage, but 1 less agility. And that definitely matters. Whereas a TIE fighter, you can survive some stuff, clutch roll or like some modifier going on. The vulture only has 2. There is a gimmick to increase that up to 3. If you have struts and you'll land on a rock in such a way where you obstruct the shot using that obstacle, you can get an obstruction to your 2 to give you 1 more die. But that's not even at that level of a TIE fighter, because the other thing that vultures don't have is a focus action. They have a calculate. They are robots, and calculates by themselves are just worse than focuses. Where focus modifies all your eyeballs, you spend 1 calculate to change just 1 of your dice. However, just calling them bad focuses does not illustrate the problems with them. They are closer to how force works in the game, where both have the default effect of spend this many charges to change this many eyeball results, and they both have a lot of abilities that say spend 1 force, spend 1 calculate to do X. But here's the thing, you typically have more than 1 force charge, and that force charge typically recharges at the end of the round. Not calculates. Calculates you have to spend an entire action just to get 1 of. Hey, remember that cool ability where it said spend calculate to do X? Guess what? That was your only eyeball modifier. Calculates are bad force. That's what they are. They do have some gimmicks to them. They have a much better dial. They got blue 2 sharps, which are really fantastic. They have blues 2, 3, and 4. They got a nice 2 talon. They have a 1 K-turn, which is not as useful as you might think it is, but it's pretty handy sometimes. 1 sharps, which are huge. 3 sharps, access to 2 banks, and a red 3 bank, which you'll never be using. The TLDR with actually flying these things and the hyenas, who have a similar dial, is that you want to be using sharp turns almost always. You'll be playing it almost as if you're on a grid, going either straight or taking a sharp turn. Their main gimmick is the struts. It's a lot of text, and it's been errataed. All the errata did was remove the ability to barrel roll off of the obstacle. When 2.0, what people were doing, landing on an asteroid, decided they didn't want to actually land on the asteroid, and then do a barrel roll action to get off of it, and then keep flying next turn. In 2.5, AMG decided they didn't want that, so they changed it. I'd be okay with bringing it back. But I wasn't around for 2.0. Maybe it was too annoying to see, too annoying to play against. But I don't know. I think it would be fine. Anyway, if you fly over an obstacle, if it's a debris or an asteroid cloud, you can flip it and land on the asteroid or debris cloud. From there, you can rotate 90 degrees and essentially play tower defense. It's really iconic. You can really set up a little defensive perimeter over objectives and stuff. You can put an asteroid debris cloud next to an objective, put the vulture or hyena right on top of that, and just collect points. every round. The other gimmick that they can have is independent calculations. Normally, vultures and a lot of other droids have network calculations ability. Essentially, when you're nearby other friends who have calculate tokens, you can take a friendly calculate from somebody and use it as if it's your own, specifically to change dice. Importantly, you cannot use that calculate for abilities. Network calc is just one way that droids and separatists try to get around the whole calculates are bad thing. It encourages you to fly grouped, like stay in formation, stay close to each other, but if it's not clear and obvious, this is a once per opportunity thing. So let's say you have no calculates of your own, but you're next to two friends that do have calculates. Network calc only allows you to borrow one of them once per opportunity. The other gimmick that they have with the calculates is the independent calculations. And now this turns off network calculations and prevents other network calculated ships from taking calculates from you. But it gives you two calculates for the price of one. While you perform a white calculate action, you may treat it as red to gain one additional calculate token. And it's a may as well, so you don't have to red calculate every time you do it. This is really, really useful for if you have abilities that are like spend calculate to do X, like 081, or Discord missiles where it says spend a calculate to launch one buzz droid. Independent calculations is really, really good. And for majority of 2.5, this was free. You could just put it on or take it off. But in the last series of patches for the game, AMG made it 2 points in order to... We're not exactly sure exactly the reasoning, but there's a few guesses of why they increased the price. One of them was to decrease the power of one particular vulture. The other option is to discourage people from running independent calc swarm lists, which was one of the few ways that swarm play was actually viable in tournament play. Ever since they nerfed it to make it 2 points, nobody really was playing full, real swarm lists and separatists. I don't know. Independent calculations were just good. Maybe they didn't like that in terms of like theme, but I don't know. 081. People sometimes call him Doofus because of the DFS, but no separatist player calls him Doofus because all named vultures are DFS. They're all doofuses. Separatist players usually refer to them by their numbers, because calling them doofus is not particularly useful. But the way vultures are typically played is as a solo filler, where there's only going to be one of them anyway, so we generally know what you mean when you say doofus. But 081. 081 is an I3, which is really big. There's not a lot of I3s. It's got all the stats of a vulture, the same dial as a vulture. More importantly for 081, his main gimmick is out of the usable vultures, he has the most loadout value. Kelrods don't count, and we'll get to the Kelrods. So 081 is the preferred filler of choice, primarily because you can just grab him, stick independent calculations and energy shells, which are, if you're not aware of, they're good, especially on like ships that will die quickly anyway. Basically, you take this, you sit on a rock next to an objective, collect points for the rest of the game, maybe throw an energy shell snipe at somebody, maybe get some damage in, and if they want to come get you, they have to get a ship or two away from the fight to come and deal with a 2-pointer vulture, which is, you know, a win-win for you. So 081's ability, while a friendly ship range 0-1 defense, it may spend one calculate token to change all crit results to hit results. So it can use its ability for itself, but it's not as good as it might sound when you're first reading it for a number of reasons. One is you're spending a calculate. You only have one calculate of your own and maybe two with independent calculations. You can only spend your own calculate for this ability. It changes one crit to a hit. This is you modifying your opponent's dice, which in the tree of events happens before the owner of the dice modifies their dice. So the attacker targets 081, they choose their weapon, they roll their dice. Then you get a chance to spend a calc to modify that crit to a hit, if there is a crit. And then if that attacker has any further modifiers of change a hit to a crit, they can change that same die back to a crit if they wanted to. So because of this timing, 081's ability only works on natural crits. If your opponent modifies a crit using an ability or a card, the timing for 81's ability is long past, and you can't stop it with 81's ability. And let's say you did change a crit to a hit, you're still taking a hit unless you roll out of it. And because you spent a calculate to do the ability, you'll no longer have a calculate to change an I to an evade. It's not great. The main selling point of 081 is that he's an I3 with 7 loadout, and he's 2 points. Certain build outs. I mentioned independent calc energy shells. This is your typical 2 points filler loadout where you just sit on rock, snipe. You could be spicy, and instead of going energy shells, you could go something like cluster missiles. This might make sense more with a swarm list where you have a bunch of vultures, and if you have a bunch of vultures with cluster missiles and you have certain mechanics that get your friends free locks, cluster missile spam vulture swarm can be very spicy, but we don't really see that too often in try-hard tournament play. But it is a thing, and if you can pull it off, fuck yeah. You just gotta get in close, which typically vultures don't really want to be close. No, that's not true. Vultures want to be either far away or range 0. Those are the two places that vultures want to be. It's not uncommon to bring threat tracers on 081. He's in higher initiative than typically all your other swarm ships. So the threat tracers would come out at I3, so you can get those locks out early before the other ships. Can be a huge damage multiplier. The one thing I don't like about this is that 081 is still a vulture. He can die before getting his threat tracers off. And the other thing I don't like threat tracers for is they can miss. Every time I bring them, I miss, and I feel bad, and I feel silly. But it's a thing. I've had it happen to me. It hurts. It hurts a lot. If there's enough follow up. Let's see other Discord missiles. Discord missiles. This is another one of those spend a calculate to do X abilities. It's typically paired up with the independent calculations. If you don't know, it pops out this little remote that doesn't move. If it lands on somebody, it attaches, and if it's still attached at the end of the round, it applies a crit to that person. There's more to it than that, but that's the general bit of it. At first glance, it might not seem that it's better than just a missile, but it kind of really is. This is one of the more cooler, more powerful Separatists only shenanigans. There was an errata made in 2.5 where they decreased the agility of the buzz droids from 3 down to 1. This was probably done because of the changes to range 0 attacks, but all it really did in terms of gameplay change is that you're less encouraged to use them for path blocking and more encouraged to do direct drops on enemies. May not actually be a necessary errata. I could imagine the community deciding, hey, let's make the errata list one less card. Buzz droids with 3 agility would probably be fine. The next one on my list is Siege of Coruscant 081. Siege of Coruscant is a scenario expansion where it's just a bunch of cards and a bunch of cardboard, but no actual model or anything like that. But there's some alternative cards for ships that exist, and 081 has an alternative Siege of Coruscant version where it has a slightly different, better ability. It has a bunch of upgrades. Some of them are only found in Siege of Coruscant, and you cannot change any of these. You can't stick upgrades to it. Again, 081 is in initiative 3. It does all the vulture things. You're stuck with network calc, so number independent calculations. You're stuck with Discord missiles, which is fine. You have a different ability. You have contingency protocols, Shroud-like override. Let's talk about its ability first. While defending, you may spend 1 charge and 1 calculate token to cancel 1 crit result. So already that's a huge upgrade. You completely remove that crit result. As in, you take that crit die and you just put it somewhere else. It's no longer in play. Your opponent has 1 less die that they can modify. You can do that twice in a game, but you're a vulture, you might not even live long enough to spend both charges, and if you do, that's huge. This can be really, really big if you're carrying a crate in salvage scenarios, where if you take a crit, then you have to drop the objective. It takes a couple of turns together because first turn, you don't do anything. Second turn, you're spending your action to pick up the objective. Third turn, you're getting your calculate, and then finally, using your ability. There's a couple things bad with it. One is this time, it only applies to you. You can't use it for your friends. And the other thing bad with it is that between this ability and Discord missiles, and being stuck with netcalc only, you're going to be mana starved a lot. Yeah, this ability is generally considered a straight upgrade from the basic 081. Discord missiles, they're cool. We talked about that. Contingency protocol. This is a Siege of Coruscant only thing. After a ship is destroyed, another filling ship range 0-3 with contingency may perform an action even while in stress. It encourages you to fly swarms. It's kind of similar to and pairs well with TA-175 relay, this guy, where something dies and something cool happens and everybody gets presents, but contingency only specifies one other ship to be able to perform an action. It's really, really fun. The only downside about building around this is that 8-ship lists and swarm ships, specifically Separatist swarm ships, weren't that crazy viable, but that might be just a consequence of just Separatists not being particularly viable. Separatists as a faction has always been the underperforming of the factions. The last ability the 081 has is Sharlak Override. You no longer have the struts. Instead of landing on obstacles, you can now fly through them. You can fly through them twice in a match. This is a pretty neat ability. You can like really catch your opponent off guard if they forget about it or they're not expecting it, and this can really open up your movement if you plan accordingly for it. If I had to choose between 081 and Siege of Coruscant 081 as a filler, I'd probably go with the regular 081 just for the independent calc energy shell. Sit on a rock, do nothing all game. Because 081, yeah, the ability is really good for something like salvage, as a filler in salvage, but because of how contingency works, I generally only take this guy out when I'm playing a list with contingency. Next one on my list is Iron Assembler. Iron Assembler is an I1 with 5 loadout value, with all the stats of a vulture, with a really, really cool ability. The Iron Assembler is only available in the Hotshots and Aces Reinforcements pack. The Iron Assembler's main gimmick is its ability. After a friendly ship in range 0-1, and that includes itself, skips its execute maneuver step, you may spend 1 charge. If you do, there is an asteroid or debris cloud at range 0 of it. The ship may repair 1 damage. This is very clearly intended to work with grappling struts and landing struts, because the mechanic it uses to stay on the rock is the quote-unquote skip execute maneuver step, and that triggers that. So at the beginning of that ship's movement, it can be healed, which is pretty fucking cool. Before the independent calc nerf, this was the filler of choice because of how annoying energy shell independent calc was. Whereas like 081 sitting on a rock with independent calc with energy missiles, yeah, it's annoying, but it's a vulture. You can potentially one-shot it, and if you don't one-shot it, you'll get him in the next round. It's not that crazy to deal with. Iron Assembler, if you don't one-shot the Iron Assembler, next turn he can come back to full health or 2 health. It meant that if you wanted this vulture gone, you had to one-shot it. And that means potentially using one of your nukes and one of your strong ships to go after this 2-point ship, because otherwise he's just going to get his health back. It felt annoying to deal with the Iron Assembler, but it's still a really, really cool ability. There's shenanigans you can do with friendlies where like if you have 2 ships on a rock, you can heal each other. One fun friendship mechanic is having 081 and Iron Assembler on the same rock together, where both their abilities can like help each other. You can kind of think of them as one 4-point tower that has 2 attacks, 6 health that can heal itself 3 times, potentially 9 health. This kind of compares to other tanky 4-pointers that we have, like Dirge, but not really. It's still a little too jank to be on that level. My main problem with this gimmick is the vultures can get one shot and then the combo falls apart. But hey, it's a thing. Very, very cool. But as I mentioned before, because it was annoying to deal with and the Separatists can't have nice things, they nerfed independent calculations. If you want to take energy shells on Iron Assembler, you have to be net calc. You could go Discord Missile and independent, which is an interesting compromise. It's a lot harder to land that Discord missile while you're sitting on a rock. Like your opponent really has to like fly towards you in such a way that they get hit by it, and strong players will note how to avoid that. But it's an interesting compromise because this is still like usable. This is still like a good 2-point filler to sit by an objective to collect points. And if somebody threatens you, you get 2 calculates to defend yourself. You get Discord to shoot out. This is still good. Hell, even just energy shells and net calc is also still good. It's not as good as independent calc, but this is still a great 2-point filler. Personally, I'm okay with the whole like you can't bring independent calc with energy shells, but I do kind of miss this. Like, yeah, it was annoying to deal with, but like I feel like the Separatists need a little bit of a win. And I don't think this was that crazy of like game breaking thing. Like, definitely wasn't. It was just annoying to deal with. But the solution to that is, one shot the iron assembler. That's really all you need to do. It's just the nerf to independent calc affects more than just iron assembly. It affects everybody in the Separatists, and that hurts a lot. Okay, next one. What do we got? The horse shells. Horse shells are I1 2 pipped, meaning you can only bring 2 of these with 4 loadout value, the stats of a vulture, with the actions of a vulture, with the dial of a vulture. Their gimmick is their ability. After an enemy ship in your bullseye at range 0-2 declares another friendly ship as a defender, you may perform a calc or lock action. This ability is honestly very forgettable. When it does trigger and when you remember about it, it's a really nice action economy thing that can get you an extra lock on something or get you a calc if you didn't have a calc already. And that extra lock can synergize well with some other ships we're going to look at eventually, like the HMPs or the Bactoid Hyenas. But the ability is pretty hard to trigger. Being limited to a bullseye is pretty tough, so you kind of have to run 2 of them together and create a little bullseye net. 0-2 is also a little bit of an issue. It's not a whole lot of range. The best time for this to trigger is actually range 0, when you like force a bump on somebody, in which case when you do, you need to remember that you have this ability, and so you don't take the red calc action that's available to you in 2.5. Because guess what? If you're stressed, you cannot perform your action. So you can't do these while stressed. Build outs. Most everyone just kind of brings out just energy shells on them. Before the independent calc nerf, there was a generic ship, which I'll talk about in a moment, where you would go Discord missiles and independent calculations, and that was like a thing on the Sep drone. But since the change to independent, the Sep drone can no longer do this gimmick, and instead Horseshaw filled this niche a little bit worse because Horseshaws are initiative 1 and the Sep drones are I3. Independent is good, but on the horse shells in particular, again, if you're stressed, that turns off this ability, and if you take 2 calcs with independent, you'll get a stress. So still good, it's still a thing, and independent is a main. So if you're really banking on that sweet lock, you can choose to take only 1 calc without the stress, but it's a thing to consider. These are, I don't know, these are generally not that great. These are only really seen when you're already flying a bunch of vultures and you just need more vultures, and hey, here's one with a neat little action economy ability. And again, because it's a vulture, it's gonna die really quickly. So even if you do finally trigger it, oftentimes that vulture is also gonna probably die soon. So yeah, the best way to fly the horse shells is to not stress about the ability. Just treat it like a regular vulture. That just happens to be I1. Gives you enough loadout values that you can actually bring fun stuff like energy shells or cluster missiles or discords with independent or yeah. Main reason the ability is forgettable is that it happens when your opponent is declaring a defender. Unless you particularly practiced it or have like a cheat sheet in front of you or you have a note on your hand to remember this particular trigger, it's really easy to miss it. Next one is the Siege of Coruscant HCP. Okay, so Horse prototype gets a appearance in Siege of Coruscant, has contingency protocol and a struggle override. It has a different ability. It's still I1. It's still stuck with only having 2 pips on it, which I mentioned in the other one, but you can only have 2 horse shells. So its ability is nearly identical. Nobody will blame you if you thought it's the same one, but where the regular horse shell only triggers around 0-2, the Siege of Coruscant horse shell's ability can trigger at any range. Well, 0-3, because they don't mention any range. This is actually bumps up the horse shell by a lot, like to the point that I might consider this over regular Horschel. Because you can actually trigger this intentionally. It's a lot easier to line up bullseyes at the start of the game. Getting to range 3 isn't particularly hard from the first 2 turns, and so you can actually intentionally trigger this, and it's pretty nice when you do. It's a Siege of Coruscant vulture, so you got Shardlock Override, you're stuck with netcalc, you got Contingency Protocol, and the most baffling thing about it is that it has ion missiles. Now, they gave it ion missiles more as a gameplay feature of the Siege of Coruscant scenario, but in a regular X-Wing play, ion missiles is not particularly great for a number of reasons. Yeah, it's better than just shooting a primary at range 3, but you can only do 1 damage with it, and any subsequent damage is ion tokens. But 3 dice is pretty dodgeable. If you're actually trying to ionize something, you should probably be trying to use like ion torpedoes or something like that. Ion missiles would have been a lot better if it was just energy shell charges or discords or anything else really. All in all, this is a ship you generally bring only when you're doing a contingency protocol thing, because you can immediately bring 2 Horschels and have 2 instances of contingency. And if they die because they're vultures and they're gonna die, that will feed your big boy contingency ships like 404 or any of your tri-fighters who have contingency. Okay, next one is Kelrods. The Kelrods are fucking weird, man. The Kelrods are only in the expansion pack as the Iron Assembler, so they're only in that pack. They're an I-1 3-pipped vulture. Their gimmick is that they are not robots, they are organic. There's like a humanoid or like an alien or something in them. I don't know the lore, but I don't care. So it's a little dude inside of a vulture droid. So they changed the network calc ability and gave him the modified for organics. It makes your 3 sharp turn red, which completely makes it so you don't use that ever. But it makes your 2 banks blue and your 3 banks white. 2 bank blues are pretty neat, and you retain your 2 sharp blues, which is also neat. Having access to 3 bank white is pretty neat. Because you are an organic, you get a focus action. Whoop-dee! Woo! But you can't just use your focus action. You have to barrel roll to get a focus action, which is a choice. I think they left a calculate on the action bar so you could bring things like the Discord missiles and work with other relays that are like if you have a calculate action on your action bar. So they will still work with those kind of triggers, but to not have like a normal focus actions is annoying. The playstyle they were probably thinking about was you barrel rolling and focusing on every turn with your action, and then next turn just doing a blue sharp or a blue bank or blue whatever to heal that stress and then immediately do it again. But what if you don't want to barrel roll? And they're vultures, and when they die, their ability lets them move all their tokens to their friend, which is another Kelrod. So then you have a Kelrod vulture with a bunch of focus tokens. But then, like, why? I kind of wish that those 2 were swapped, if where like you can barrel roll into red calc and then have just a regular focus action, or have a focus action or a calculate action and you get to pick one or the other. I don't know. Kelrods are weird. Their ability is after you are destroyed, you may transfer each of your locks and green tokens to another friendly Kelrod. It's like a baby version of contingency, where if one of them dies, one other ship gets benefit, but like it's only limited to Kelrods. I don't know. There's a bunch of annoying things about the Kelrods. So because you don't have net calc, you actually can't bring independent calculations, because you can't fulfill the first half of the paragraph where it says replace your network calc with this. You also don't have a configuration slot to put struts on. Why can't they blend on rocks? I don't know. The other annoying thing was on release, when Kelrods were first printed, if you look at the card, it's an initiative 2. But on the cardboard of the like base plate of whatever, it says the correct initiative 1. It's a really bad print error typo. They just never caught that misprints in time, and it's always there. It's always going to be haunting whoever did that mistake. It might even be that the typo is on the cardboard and not the card, and it was always intended to be I2 and not I1. But when they noticed the mistake, they decided, hey, it's going to be easier to errata the card than it is to errata the cardboard, and so they made it into an I1 permanently. Who knows? So what's the benefit of Kelrods? They have a talent slot. They are a talented vulture. They finally did it. So that gives you access to a whole bunch of really strong abilities. Marksmanship, Lone Wolf, Treacherous, Predator, Crackshot, Elusive, Debris Gambit, Enduring if you really want. Initiative 1 Squad Leader is some pretty nice strength too. It'd be really funny if you could put Outmaneuver on this thing. But that's okay. Snapshot would be really fun too, by the way. But it's not enough to warrant actually bringing this. A bunch of us were playing around with these when they first came out just to test them out. They are not good. Don't use them. Let them land on rocks. That's my opinion on the Kelrods. Okay, so next on my list are the two generics, the Sep Drone and the Trade Federation one. I can bring them up right now. This is launch bay, by the way. I'm using it because I'm more familiar with it, and the UI brings up little art with the text and everything. For the purposes of like this video, it's pretty handy. Where's the other one? Trade Fed. So Separatist drones, I mentioned before, but these used to be the Discord gophers. Discord missiles used to be 3 points, and the independent calc used to be 0 points, so you could actually run this. And people would run 2 of these with 081 with Discord missiles, and that would be like the 3-ship Discord missile swarm thing. And it was cool. It was good. People would run like Captain Seer with it to like buff them even more. But nowadays, since they changed to independent calculations, you can't do this anymore, which is sad. This generic ship has become what every other generic ship, 2.5 AMG X-Wing, it's a dead card. It's just not really a thing in 2.5. There are instances to use a generic, and that's when there's a upgrade combination that only a generic can bring for whatever reason. That used to be the Separatist drone's niche. You could do that independent calc Discord missile and be an I3, but that's no longer possible, so it's yeah, dead card. The other one is the Trade Federation drone, which has no loadout value absolutely anywhere, no kind of upgrades, none at all, and it's I1. So literally, this is definition of dead card. This is probably the worst card in the game. Oh wow, Trade Federation doesn't even have a missile slot. So even had loadout value, like, well, you won't even like be able to put anything on it. Yeah,